Yolanda Leotta, poetess and storyteller from Italy. I want to discuss the theme of Global Literature Conclave 2021, Challenge and Prospects of Literature in the Changing Scenario. A changing world has always fed great literature with the dual ambition to thrive on the conflict between old and new worlds, while bringing into play all the creativity of literature to frame, redefine, comprehend, and criticize with a view to understanding changes in the human condition in its widest sense. Migration, digitalization, climate change, and the possible end of humanity as we know it are each in their own way grand challenges to the world. Competing with more media than ever, literature will have to arm itself with expressions that are unique for literature. This need for a future global literature should also mean that past world literature can be reshaped in a meaningful way. The long path of world literature is very unevenly distributed among nations and languages, with some literatures having many centuries or even millennia of continuous literary activity, whereas others have much shorter paths to build on. On the other hand, contemporary literature is immensely broad and much less organized into canons. The future of world literature is closely connected to the process of globalization, in which cultural references blend and intersect more and more, and the expectation of how a literary work is formed by the world will change with this process. In his 1987 lecture Canon Period, Frank Cammod argues that both canonization and periodization are always of ordering the past and picking from them what we at present find valuable and interesting. One of the privileged prose over poetry in literary studies, not just in the predominated contemporary world, but also in the long and less preorientated past. Current movements and trends in world literature should have been seen as influences on not only present and future literature, but also the history of world literature. For current topics are already making their mark on both reality and fiction, have the potential for making a significant impact of the future shape of international circulation of literary works, as well as the continuous harmonization of works that circulate as world literature of the past. The four topics are continuing migration and networked identity, the global spread of digital interfaces, climate change, and the challenge to the unity of humanity in the form of a post-human horizon. Each of these has a particular potential for bridging cultural and local differences, as well as providing challenges for literary genres and modes of writing. Migration is first and foremost an extremely important social and political issue, as witnessed by the thousands of boat refugees that cross the Mediterranean each week from Africa to Europe. The number of Asians involved in the development of African countries, the million of illegal immigrants working in the USA, and the high-skilled migrants that are moving into the fast-growing centers of capital and cultural production, to mention just a few examples. The many effects of such mass movements affect both receiving and sending nations and change the perspective for non-migrants as well. This change takes place through more and wider traveling in a change of the general outlook of the world, in which the cultural side of globalization supplements national identity building. Migration literature most often contributes a combination of positive cosmopolitan worldview with a critical perspective on the drawbacks of migrating. It does so with the ability to approach the world with the moderated strangeness that comes from being neither completely estranged nor completely at home in the world. It's for better of worse. Also likely that more and more talent will switch language the write in English in order to reach a wider audience. The latter has even suggested that in a few years people will not notice whether writers and are language shifters. The works are unmistakably works written in English, but with a presentation of their migrant background that is used creatively on the level of the language. This is also a characteristic of the Dominican American writer Junot Diaz, whose The Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde includes an abundance of Spanish phrases. Interestingly, for the appeal of this mode of writing, Diaz's novel was ranked first in BBC appeal of this mode of writing culture poll among critics of 21st century novels. As migrant experiences increasingly permeate the present day, there will also be a tendency to seek out such experiences of the past, whether it is in lesser known works of African and Asian travel writing of the 7th century, in the highly canonized but none less emigre works of James Joyce, Samuel Beckett, Paul Celan, and Vladimir Nabokov, the complex relations to languages, cultures, nations, and markets that a new generation of writers embraces. Whereas migration and the digital revolution can be said to have more positive than negative sides in their efforts to make the world more open and connected, the effects of climate change are almost all negative, with rising sea levels and the temperature increases being two of the most drastic consequences that will have global effects. Migration will be one consequence of the changed condition in the similarly self-defeating era of the Anthropocene. This is also an issue for literature on a number of levels. The interest in present-day issues plays a part in shaping interests in the past. It may not be a theme that will drag forgotten writers to prominence, but it will change the perception of a number of writers who have dealt with nature's humanity's otherness. And the environment provides a point of comparison where works can meet across great distance in time and space, but influenced by the same rise in sea levels and temperatures. While climate change is a serious threat to both the ecological and societal order of the world, it doesn't change radically the idea of the human or propose a future fundamental change in what it means to be human. Only a few decades ago, I would have been unlikely to see a history of the human species and give a lengthy chapter of the various ways in which humanity could be made responsible for creating its own replacement. But this is the case in Yuval Noah Harari's *Sapiens*, a brief history of humankind from 2014. Harari ends her chronicle by introducing a number of disturbing ways in which human biology could be changed and possibly enhanced through chemistry, genetic modification, and extended man-machine interaction, with the possibility of artificially made life looming in the background. In some ways, it seems that humans are more disposed to think of the end of the world, an apocalypse, rather than thinking of being supplanted by a species evolved from us. However, with the acceleration of technological, not least biotechnological invention, it is hard to ignore the possibility that human existence could be very different within not millennia but only centuries or even decades. The post-human origin has a deep resonance in literary history, in works such as Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, for instance. This novel remained visionary and relevant to the situation that we face today in the presentation of future worlds that are both less and more advanced than the world we inhabit. The capacity of Dr. Frankenstein To stitch together organs and bring them to life appears extremely unsophisticated compared to present-day 3D printed organs and DNA-modified embryos. This novel do present us with imagined realities of things we have not seen and may never want to see. It's evident that the internet has revolutionized the possibility for communicating and obtaining information, and that this is part of a process that will only continue to gain momentum as more and more people get access to a source of information that is still less than 2 decades old, folks, most of us. Mobile communication has also made a huge impact. One of the most astonishing figures may be that there are now almost as many phones as there are people in Africa, with again has provided a basis for transforming communication and trade. It's important to notice that it is not just the accessible content that has shifted, but also the form of the various impact globally. In a few decades, cultures have been given new, strong, and evolving media that have become the central apparatuses with which we engage with information, including the production and consumption of literary works. This change has been reinforced by the basic user interfaces with which people spend a significant part of their life interacting, as well as the communality of various online services that create a basic common understanding of ways of communicating that didn't exist before. The use of Twitter in political struggles, the idea of googling, and the expansion of connection and friendship through Facebook and various other social networks. Thanks for listening and giving me a place to voice my opinion.